What's up guys, There's Cousin here. Today I'm with my good friend Bogdan and we are going to be doing a real-world React interview. Bogdan is a mid-level developer and this interview is a mock interview, so it's not actually for a real job, but let's pretend that it is. And it's going to be for a job that will require somewhere around like 1 or 2 years of React experience, which Bogdan has more than that. So the way this interview is going to work is, as you can see on the screen right now, we have the questions that I'm going to ask Bogdan. So the first part will be basically what I want this to be. And this is also for you, Bogdan. This is going to be a conversation. There's no pressure. There's no pressure to like get every answer correctly. I just want to talk about React and I want to see how you essentially think about React, how you understand React and how you like to work with React. And I have a bunch of questions here. We'll go through them. I may skip some questions just based off time and whatnot. And I may add questions spontaneously because I really want this to be a conversation. And I want this to just flow naturally. So again, Bogdan, no pressure. You don't have to get all of these right. Just do your best. Let's talk about React and let's just enjoy React because we're both React developers and we really enjoy React. And then the second part of the interview is going to be a little coding exercise. And this one is going to be simple. We're just going to have you build a simple sort of component, do some things to it, and it's not going to be anything too fancy. And again, I just want to see how you work with React, how you think about React, and I will ask you some questions about why you're doing certain things and just to see how your mind works and how you approach building React to see if you would be a good fit to work at Cousin Solutions, because let's assume that this is for Cousin Solutions. Cool. So Bogdan, welcome to the interview. Are you ready?
Yeah, sounds great. Glad to be here, man.
Glad to have you, Herman. Again, big shout out to Bogdan for doing this. I needed somebody to do an interview and Bogdan was ready to do it, so much appreciated. Let's get into it. Cool. So let's start the conversation about React and let's just start small and let's talk about React. So my first question to you, Bogdan, is, this is a really simple one. What is React and how can you best describe it?
Well, that's really kind of controversial question depending on who you ask, I guess. Because
Sure.
a lot of people see it as like a framework or like a library and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So the opinion is always kind of divided in the React community. I see it more like a library sorts, right? For JavaScript to create UI interfaces.
Mm-hmm. And so you would describe it as, okay, fair enough. So as a library to build user interfaces.
Mm-hmm.
So then something like Next.js would be more of like a framework, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough. And then, so React, right? It does things a little bit differently, right? So you're not directly working with HTML and CSS, although yes, you are with CSS, but like you're not directly working and rendering. I mean, you are, but when you're coding it, you're not. So usually in React, you code with JSX, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of a thing that we do. So my next question to you is, what is JSX?
JSX is essentially the kind of like the templating language for React, right? So yeah, kind of like you have it in, I guess, backend applications, right? Where they use templating languages. You have the same in React where you can basically insert JavaScript inside of HTML, which is kind of like its own thing called JSX.
Yeah. And like, what are some of the benefits of like having JSX and having the ability to like put JavaScript in HTML? Like, why was JSX initially kind of created?
That I'm not really sure of, but I really enjoy working in JSX because of like having the option of using JavaScript inside essentially HTML and having some of the flexibility there.
Yeah, fair enough. So the reason why, and I'm going to mention this because I really like it. So like back in the early days when React was initially like developed, they weren't using JSX. They were like using straight up functions like h1s, divs and whatnot. And the way that you would write that, it would be ugly and you would get easily lost, right? So like what they wanted to do to make this more accessible to developers is give them something that is familiar to them, but at the same time allows you to do all of this JavaScript, right? Which is how JSX was born. It's like, okay, let's make it look and feel like HTML, but let's also allow you to put JavaScript inside so you get the best of both worlds. You get all of the reactivity from React, but you still, you can work with it almost like HTML. Sure, we have like class versus class name and some of these other properties that are different, but essentially anyone that kind of knows HTML and JSX and JavaScript can easily, with just a little bit of learning, can like contribute and learn JSX and pick it up quite easily. So I think they did a good job on that.
Yeah.
Cool. So another thing about React is it does something differently where it doesn't directly kind of, I mean, I'm answering the question now, but like...
I think I know where it's going.
Yes, of course. It's your typical React question that is kind of the standard to ask in an interview, but essentially you have this concept of like the virtual DOM, right?
Yeah.
So if you can explain what the virtual DOM is and how React uses it to work with it.
I have like a basic understanding of the virtual DOM. So it's from how I understand it is basically React doesn't interact with the real DOM, right? It has like the virtual DOM, and then once the things kind of like are set in stone and everything's kind of done, it then injects everything into the real DOM. So that's how I got my understanding of the virtual DOM. And then, yeah, on the re-renders, it like checks the references of certain functions and whatnot and objects, and then just renders it out.
That's exactly it, right? So the virtual DOM is a tool that React uses to kind of see, okay, what changed, right? It has a visual, so the virtual DOM specifically is like a virtual representation of the document object model. If anyone doesn't know what the DOM is the document object model. It's basically what you see on the browser, right? Whatever the browser renders, you have a bunch of objects and stuff in it, that's the document object model. And React has a virtual layer in between where it uses this to sort of see, okay, you changed some piece of state in your application. What results does that cause in the virtual DOM first, and how does that differ from the DOM, so that it can then go and make efficient updates? It's one of the reasons why, like, one of the reasons why it was created was so that React can make updates more efficiently, right? And actually, one question that I do want to talk about, because this is a topic that I was interested in recently. What would be some of like, or at least one of like the disadvantage of having a virtual DOM?
So the first one that pops into my mind is maybe performance, right? I think it's, if you have computational heavy tasks that you need to do on the front end, which is kind of like, I don't know, not really a thing that should be done on the front end, but if you do, I think it can affect the performance a lot. But I think.
Yeah. So exactly. So performance is a thing, and it's basically that one of the disadvantages of it is that everything in React has to go through the virtual DOM, right? Which if you have a lot of stuff, right, there can be some performance implications. And the reason why I mentioned this question is recently I was looking at like signals, which is a different concept completely unrelated to React. But signals, at least in the way that I currently understand them, they allow you to sort of bypass the virtual DOM and manipulate directly HTML, the DOM, like HTML elements, right? Okay. So you can have a signal. It doesn't necessarily at all actually have to be even in the component. And it kind of bypasses this whole thing of React. And the reason why I was interested in this is that this came out as a result of like some of the disadvantages of the virtual DOM. So it was just interesting to think about like there's a different way that you can do things, and that's not how React was sort of designed to work with at all. That's why I mentioned it. Cool. Let's quickly do this one. What is the difference between controlled and uncontrolled components? Or inputs, actually. I think I should put inputs here. Controlled and uncontrolled inputs.
Ooh, you got me there. I think I cannot answer that question.
If I tell you you have an input, text input, and then you can either get the value by state, or you can get the value directly from the HTML element without state. Ring a bell?
Nah, not really.
Cool. Now, fair enough. We'll skip this one. No worries. Just for your own information, controlled inputs is when you have a piece of state and then you use the value from the state to the input, and then on change you change the value. Uncontrolled is when you have no state, and whenever you want to access the value of the input, you just get it by the ref, I think, of the input. So you just get the value directly without state, right? Because inputs will have a value, right?
Yeah.
But if you control them, then you control the actual state that that the input has. So you can do things with it.
Yeah, okay.
Cool.
Thanks.
There you go. So again, this is a conversation, right? I just want to see how you are thinking about React. So no worries about anything. What are some of the hooks commonly used in React? So this is really like the most common basic building block hooks of React.
So the one that I used a lot and still use a lot is basically the use effect hook, right? If you are working with data and you need to fetch data, you don't get around not using it. And I think use memo as well for just performance, I guess, and making sure that re-renders do not happen unnecessarily. And use callback not so much. I think use effect and use memo are kind of like the essential hooks, right? That you kind of learn when you're like starting out. When I started out, there was like class-based components and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, the old days.
Yeah,
I was gonna say the good old days, but not necessarily. No, the old days.
Yeah, the old days. Yeah. And yeah,
go on.
No, that's it.
You touched on something that is the point of a lot of debate, which is use effects, man, and fetching data. So generally now, you shouldn't really use a use effect to fetch data, even though to fetch data you would need a use effect, for the simple reason that fetching data is a whole process, and there's so many things that you need to think about and handle, like abort controllers, race conditions, loading states, error states, that it's kind of just easier to default to a library that does this already, like React Query, but that's kind of usual, the recommendation. But you do have a point where, like, even if you use React Query, like, you need to know and understand about use effect. Because if you, for some reason, have to build it yourself, or even have to like work with use effect in a different way, you need to understand the life cycle of use effect. So it's really, really important. So like all of the debate that's happening, like I get it, but like you still need to learn about use effect, and use effect is still a very valuable hook to use in a React application.
Yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned use memo, so I won't ask about that. You mentioned use callback. I use memo and use callback, not too often, but like specific instances where I need to. For example, use memo, as you said, to prevent unnecessary renders, but use callback as well. Sometimes I need to like pass a function to a use effect, and I don't want that function to re-trigger infinitely with use effect. I'll wrap it in callback. Or if I'm passing that function to a component that I don't want to render unnecessarily, I'll also use callback. Cool. One thing we haven't mentioned is useState, but I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I hope that everyone here knows what useState is. So what I will ask you is, I won't ask you about useState directly. I'll ask you, what is useRef and how does it work? And more importantly, how does it differ from useState?
I actually never really like touched useRef like in any I never had to, or I think I never had to really implement like refs.
Okay.
So I always defaulted to useState, and but useState is also a hook, but somehow I missed that one out. It was, I don't know, somehow useState is just, it doesn't feel like a hook, right? It's just you always I don't know. It's just useState. Yeah.
It feels like a value, right?
Yeah.
You just give a value, right?
Yeah.
But like you get returned like the value and the updater function, which it does.
Yeah, it's kind of part of your variables, right? It's like it's just a variable at this point, right? It doesn't feel like a hook, but it's a hook.
So I'm surprised that you never used useRef, because if you work with like third-party libraries or stuff, like you sometimes need to give them a ref to access some of the functionalities of the library, right? Like they'll usually expose some functions, and then you can do that. Or like, have you never even like had to focus an input, right? Like let's say on mount, you have a form and you want to focus the first input, you would use a ref for that to like call the focus method on it, right?
Yeah.
So you never did any of those?
I don't think I used refs for that. Yeah.
What would you use?
I think...
Because as far as I know, that's the only way to like focus an input.
Really? Wasn't there like some values that you can pass in like MUI and stuff like that?
Oh, if you use MUI,
Yeah.
yes, they will use ref under the hood.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I think I never directly touched it, but maybe
Fair
through like MUI, used it under the hood.
Yeah.
But
Fair enough.
yeah.
Fair enough. One of the things that I do want to mention is there is a difference between useState and useRef. So useRef kind of functions almost in the same way as useState. You can store values in it. So you can store like your count if you have a counter application or whatever. The only difference is that whatever you store in useRef is non-reactive, which means that it will not trigger a re-render of the component.
Oh yeah.
So if you store a value and you kind of you update it, it won't re-render your component, which means that if you use this value in the return body, you're going to get an outdated value.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this means that in a function, you can assign a new value to a ref, and then on the next line directly access that new value, right?
Makes sense.
Which with state you can't. You have to wait for a whole new re-render, right?
Yeah.
There you go. Cool. What is... Ooh, this is nice. What is context, and how does it work?
Ooh, context is interesting. I think I only used it once. So basically, use context gives you the ability to access state from essentially the top level component, right? So you basically define it at the very top level, and then you can kind of set the state at the top level, and then all of your child components would have access to that top level state, which essentially helps when you have to access the state from multiple child components without like using something called prop drilling.
Beautiful. And since you mentioned it, what are some of the issues with prop drilling? Like, why do we not want to do prop drilling?
It can get ugly pretty quick.
Very, yeah.
And it's kind of annoying just dragging the state all the way, I don't know, through 4 or 5 components all the way down.
Yeah.
It's just, it can get messy.
And then you need to rename something. You have to rename all of them, or even worse, you decide this component that's in the middle of the chain no longer should be there, should be somewhere else. What do?
Yeah.
You broke the chain, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. So context, yes, is great to do that. Perfect. Actually, on context, can you give me like one use case for a context? Like, when would it make sense to have a context? And this one, I know that you've worked with it.
Really?
Yeah. Just think of MUI and things like that.
MUI.
Or any library, man.
Are you talking about dark mode?
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Dark mode, right?
Yeah.
It's a global thing that should be accessible in your entire application, and it should also be updatable from any component. If you want to have a component in your settings menu that updates dark mode, you can just do it. You want to have a component in like your nav bar that also does it, they all can access the same context and make the update. So dark mode is like your typical solution for that. Good.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's talk a bit about state management. So since we're talking about context, what is state management in React and when is it useful?
Are you referring to any of the state management libraries by any chance?
That is my follow-up question, yes.
Okay, because I actually never used those.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know.
Interesting. Oh, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
I didn't really need to in the use cases that I've worked in, and if we had to, I would have picked up like, I don't know, MobX or Redux and whatnot. But for the applications that I worked on, we never really defaulted to a state management library.
That's a very valid answer, and yeah, the truth is not all applications need it, and you can very much build a big and complex application without state management, because that really comes in useful when you have like specific features that you need to implement, and you need to have like a more robust global state that context like wouldn't cut it, you know, like you need something more proper. Cool. Now, let's move on. We have like a few questions left, so you're almost done.
Cool.
So you're doing really great. Let's just talk a bit more about React, and these are some more like open-ended questions. What is the recommended way to structure your React code? So here I'm thinking about components, the code that goes into the components, and how other components use components, right? Like what's kind of the recommended way to approach that?
I guess there's so are you talking about like the folder structure or like the component itself?
Folder structure falls into it.
Okay, so
but it's not specifically the folder structure, but that's a part of it, yes.
Okay, yeah, you probably would have you probably would break down like the views from your components, right? So you would have a components folder, maybe a hooks folder for your custom hooks, or some other hooks that you use a lot throughout different components. Yeah, and then probably break down the components into maybe something called dumb components, right? That just renders things out, and then maybe more complex components that handle the logic and stuff like that, or using those custom hooks that you defined inside the hook folder, right? Yeah, those are kind of the first things that pop up into my mind.
Yeah. And what's like, why would you say that it's recommended? Like, it must be for a good reason, right? Like, what would be that reason?
I think separation of concerns is pretty nice, and it makes, it's nice to work in a neat structured application where you don't have to browse through all the files to just find that one specific hook that you need to use in another component, right? So I think it makes the code maintainable and easier to read and easier to work with, and also easier to onboard as well, because you need to onboard people, and if you are new to a new project and you have to look through a bunch of different files to find that one function that you actually need, it can get frustrated really quick. Yeah.
And you end up spending like a week or plus to like just figure out, and then you feel the imposter syndrome that like you don't understand what's going on, and it's a whole mess. Absolutely, yes. So one of for me, the telltale signs of a good React project is if I can get into the project fresh without knowing anything about it, and if I can immediately spot patterns and I can predict where things are going to be, and just by like even the naming of the file, of the components, I know that like this does this, and then it just makes it easy because if I need to add a new feature, I can immediately do it and I can follow the pattern.
Yeah.
I don't have to ask myself questions like, why is this done this way here? Why is it done this other way here? Which way do I use, right? So yeah, that's really, really, really important. Cool. Actually, that's a good segue. One of the other kind of benefits of having that proper structure of like components is like it makes it easier to test components as well, right? If everything is like separated in their own file and component, you can easily test them, right? So now my question is, what is a good way to test your React applications?
So I didn't really test components in the past. When I was working in a React application, we were only using Cypress for like end-to-end tests. Yeah, to basically see that everything's being rendered properly, the data's there and stuff like that. And if you change something, that if you test break, you know that the code that you introduced might have had some breaking changes.
Good. I'm happy that you mentioned it, because that is one of the main reasons why like you write tests in the first place, is not only to validate that your code is working currently, but that whatever changes you make in the future does not break your code, and you have like absolute certainty that if you designed your tests correctly, you can rely on them, and like if you ship code and your tests all pass, then you can be reasonably confident that you did not break anything. So that's a huge value. And yes, there is a difference between, so you mentioned end-to-end test, that's like integration test, where you basically, if you can just quickly describe Cypress, kind of how it is and what it does?
Yeah, so basically Cypress, it's like its own application, some sort, right? You run it and then you have your test files, and then you can run your test files, and then it runs a browser window, and then it runs through all of your application, and then based on the code that you wrote inside the tests, it will check the values inside your DOM and see if those values match with the ones that you defined in the tests, and then it will pass or not.
Yes, that's completely correct. I just want to add to that that it tests and it goes through your application as a user would.
Yeah.
So with an actual user interface, and it actually clicks and types and does all the things a user would, so that you can get to see like, okay, how does my app really behave, right? So that's Cypress. And then there's the other side of it, which if you haven't worked on it, that's fine. I also haven't worked on it too much, but there's like this whole like unit testing where you actually test individual components and you make sure that those components behave exactly in the same way. That whenever, for example, you have a button with an on-click function that you can pass, that whenever that button, like this click, that it actually does call that function and nothing else, right? So this is similar to like how you would do it in another language or another framework or library, like when you would like actually want to unit test your piece of code. So there's also that side of it, but for what it's worth, you are right. It isn't as common as end-to-end tests. And usually in a lot of projects, we haven't even done that testing because it's a bit redundant. And you cover enough with end-to-end tests that like it makes this like sort of acceptable. But there are use cases for it, definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. Last question. We're right on time. So last question, easy one. What are the React dev tools and what can you use them for?
I know there is one dev tool for like this Chrome extension, right?
That's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used it basically to see the component tree, right? When stuff is being rendered to the screen, and then if I have some like errors and weird behavior, I just try and trace the component tree and see where some of those weird behaviors were happening.
And what else? What else would you see there? I'm asking because there's one word that I'm looking for from you.
Okay.
Like when do you go and look at the React Dev tools? Like what's wrong in your application that makes you go and look there? Usually.
I haven't used the React Dev tools for a while, so
fair enough.
I have no idea.
Performance, right?
Okay.
Something's wrong in your app. It doesn't perform as you expect it to or as fast as you want it to, and you have no idea why. Open up the dev tools, look at all the components, look at how long each one takes to render, look at how many times each component is rendering, and then you also get to see the reasons why it rendered, like what caused it to render, right? Like a very basic kind of overview. Oh. And then when you make a change and you fix it, you can validate that the recording, because you can record like your performance, the profiling, that it significantly changed. And then you can validate that your fix has been implemented.
Yeah.
Cool. So that was it for the questions. Thank you very much, Bogdan. I really enjoyed this, and I hope that it felt like a conversation and not like a drill. You know?
Yeah, it felt great.
Good. Now what we're going to do is we are going to move on to the second part of the interview, which is the coding exercise. All right, cool. So now the questions are done. Let's begin the second part of the interview. So this one is going to be a technical interview. It's just a little code challenge that we're going to have to do. And these are the instructions. So currently, for all of you watching, Bogdan is on my VS Code. We're using the live share extension. And I have the app running here on my machine. This is the app React Interview. And whatever changes Bogdan is going to make to the code will automatically be saved in this file. And then my terminal is going to pick it up and it's going to run the app. So we're going to be able to see what Bogdan is doing so that you guys also get to see what Bogdan is doing. Cool. So this is the challenge. So we have some instructions here at the top, which is create a simple React application that displays a list of countries and their capitals. The application should have the following features. So the list of countries and capitals should be fetched from an API. The list should be displayed in the countries page. So this is the component that we have here, right? We're going to have to fill this up with the countries. Each country should be displayed in a separate component. And then we want to add some interactivity to this. The user should be able to filter the list by capital, right? So super simple stuff. What we have here is we have this select input from the component/UI folder. You're going to want to use this whenever you do the filters. It's a pre-built component that just does all the things. Basically, it's like a select input, but like easier to use this than to just do it manually with HTML. You have the base URL here. This is just a public API, restcountries.com version 3.1. So this is what you're going to use to fetch. Yes, to filter by capital city, you need to use the /capital and then give the capital here. This is the endpoint, right? So you're going to need to provide the capital here to this endpoint to be able to filter by capital. And actually, I need to do something here to fetch all cities, countries, use the all endpoint. So to fetch all of them, you need to use the all endpoint. I forgot to add this. Then we have here a list of filterable capitals, right? So I just let ChatGPT kind of do the work for me. So these are the ones we can filter by. In no order, just this. If you're dissatisfied with the selection here, blame it on ChatGPT, not me. Then you have just a helper function here for the type of the filterable capitals. This, I assume, will come in handy. And then you also have a useful interface here for the country. So we are working in TypeScript. And then you have the actual component. So Bogdan, I will leave it up to you. The only thing that I ask from you is to just walk me through your thought process, how you're thinking about this, how you're approaching this, and then why you're doing the things that you're doing. So without further ado, go for it. Good luck.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, the list of countries and capitals should be fetched. Okay, so we probably need a state for our countries. Oops. Is it gonna return an array? Probably. Let's just go with that for now. Engine C. It's gonna be an country. Oh.
I'm trying to import it. I may need to import it for you if it doesn't work. Does it?
Yeah.
No worries.
Could you import it for me?
Done.
Okay, great. Okay. Then probably the same with useEffect.
Yep. You got it.
Yeah, thanks a bunch. Okay. And just basic boilerplate for useEffect, right? And then we're gonna have our function fetch data, and then we're gonna fetch, right? Oh no. Fetch, and the endpoint is /all, right?
/all, correct. That's for all of them, yes.
Okay, so we might need some backticks, right? For the template. So we have the base URL /all. And then we're gonna have our set the countries to the data. Maybe we need to parse it as JSON.
You do. Whenever you're using fetch, you do.
Okay. So const parsed data. Data.json. And then we have parsed data. Oops. Okay.
So if you can just explain a bit what it is you're trying to do.
I'm trying to fetch the data from the URL and then parse it as JSON and then set the state. Yeah.
So you're definitely on the right track. Let me give you a little bit of hint. First of all, is this a synchronous or asynchronous function?
I think it should be asynchronous. Oops. Yeah, it should be asynchronous. And then we have to wait for the response and then probably wait for the parsing. Why is it giving me an error? Parse JSON maybe?
No. Lowercase. That's it. You have the right idea, just lowercase.
Okay, never mind. Okay. And then we need to call it inside here, fetch data. Oh.
So why did you define your function inside of the use effect? And not outside?
Because if we define it outside, we need to pass it to the dependency array, probably. And then it would trigger like the re-render, right? It would cause an infinite loop.
Yes, it would.
Yeah.
Good, that's the reason. And also, if you want to use async, you need a function to be able to await stuff. You can't await stuff directly in a use effect. So that's one of the reasons.
Yeah. And then we probably need a new component, right? For the country.
So one of the requirements was that each country should be displayed in a separate component.
Okay, so first let us display the list of the countries. Maybe we can just check if the countries are actually being fetched. But then I guess you have to.
I will check and I will tell you.
Help me out,
I will check and I will tell you. So I'm going to refresh, open up the console. So yes, they are available. You have a total of 250 countries returned. So initially starts off at 0 and then you have 250.
And it's an array of objects, right?
It's an array, yes.
Okay.
And every object has all of the properties, way more than you need. And the ones that I typed in the helper type here, the country, are the only ones that you need for this exercise. So I can validate your code works. So
okay,
good job.
Great.
Good. That's the right idea. You did everything perfect.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, and then I guess the next step would be rendering it out, right? The list should be displayed so we can Guess I will just do it in another div.
Something is not right.
Yeah.
You have the right idea, but something's not right. And if I can even say it, literally something is not right. Like, it's not on the right. Like, literally.
Something is not on
Like,
the
you
right.
have left and you have right. Something is not right. And consequently, something is not left.
Wait, what?
There you go. There you go. There you go. Element first,
okay.
then index, always.
Okay. Makes sense. I guess that should
If
work.
you can just also add the capital, because you have it in your type there. You can literally just add it right next to it, but we need to also show the capital.
Okay. Just, I guess, comma separated works as well. Country dot capital. Okay, great.
So let's look at the application, and I can validate that all of your countries are currently visible on the screen. If I open up my console, you also have, let me just clear it and refresh. You also have no errors, which is great. Good job. There's one thing that I do want to mention. If you could explain why you used the index as a key.
Because I know that React complains if you don't, but the reason for that is that React can actually make sense of all the different paragraphs that are being rendered and identify it with a unique value. So if you have to change it, React knows which one is it going to change.
That's totally fair. That's what keys are for. But specifically, why the index?
I mean, it's pretty unique because it's counting from, I think, 0 to how many elements there are inside the array that we have right now. So that's the easiest to use right now.
What happens if the countries change? Let's say you filter them, and then the indexes no longer match. Because you have initially a list of 250, and then you filter them to have, I don't know, 50. And now all of the ones that had their index based off of 250, some of them might still show up in the shorter array, but now all of their indexes are different, all of their keys are different essentially, because the index is different.
Oh, right, yeah.
So then what React is going to do then, it's going to not know which ones are the same, which ones are different, because all indexes are different. It's going to completely destroy all of them and then rebuild it, which defeats the whole purpose of having a key and literally is only there to silence the React warning, which you shouldn't do. But here's the thing, there's an easy fix, right? Is there something else that is unique that you could use?
I guess the name.
Of course.
Or the capital.
Are any two countries going to have the same name? Probably not.
Yeah. Or the country and the capital together.
Sure, if you want to go in depth, but you can just do the name. I think it's fine with the name.
Okay, should I change it?
Absolutely, we want to do good React.
Okay. So it's inside country.name.common, right? And then we don't need the index anymore.
Beautiful. Removing code is beautiful.
Nice.
Great. Now, so the requirement was that each country should be displayed in a separate component.
Yes. So
So
now
that should be very
we
easy to do.
Yeah, that's very trivial, I guess. We just create a new component called country, I guess. Just keep it simple. Yes.
I would maybe call it country, like country card, just because you have country at the top, and I don't think it interferes because one's a type, one's a value. But again, back to our conversation about like you come into a project and you look at a component, you need to know what it is. If it's just country, you're like, okay, country what? If it's country card, then it's like, okay, this is a UI component for the country, right?
Yeah, okay, makes sense. And then we're gonna return
exactly
the stuff that we have here. And then we're gonna pass the country. Oh. Country. You probably need to type it, right? Country. Still complaining. Okay.
Do you want a hint?
Yeah, sure.
So on the right, you've typed it as country, but on the left, you're giving it an object with a country property. So there's a mismatch.
Okay. But
you're saying it's a country, but you're giving it an object with a country inside.
Do I need a separate interface for that?
You could. Generally easier to make a separate interface, yeah. Usually in React, all components that receive props have their own interfaces, which is the name of the component plus props. Exactly.
And then I have country, and then I have this inside the country, no?
Yes, but isn't there not an easier way for you to do that? For you to get the same type?
Oh, is it just country? Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
And now, there you go.
Country props. Country card props. Yeah. Okay. And now can country cards, and then we have country equals country, and then that should work, I guess.
Let's see. So I'm refreshing, and yes, it works. Your countries are rendered. Good job. But there is an error in the console. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop.
Okay. Oh.
There.
Was it? Oh,
Country
name.
Name dot common.
Okay.
There you go. Let's see. Let's refresh. Your data is loaded and there's no more errors in the console. Great. Good
Okay.
job. Perfect. Cool. So now, the last thing, the user should be able to filter the list by capital. So what I'm going to do, in the interest of time, I am going to show you the API of the select input, and then you can just fill in the rest. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, instead of React interview, actually, ooh, what happened? Oh no. Did I lose? Okay. Thank God, I thought I lost your changes. Okay, I'm gonna create a new div. I'm gonna do select. And then here, select dot, ooh, no. Option. And then this is how your API looks. So you have the select here, and then you have select dot option. Your select will accept on change. Will accept an on change function, which will pass it the actual value here. It's gonna be of type string, right? So I'll leave it up to you.
Oof, okay. The user should be able to filter the list by capital. Okay, so we need an on change. Yeah, it's kind of hard without seeing the UI and what it does, I guess.
The UI is complete trash, so it's not worth seeing, honestly.
Yeah.
There's zero stylings applied. You have a select, so it's your typical HTML select input. You can select multiple options. That's all that you need to be concerned of. And there's only ever going to be one active option, which is the one you're filtering by. So it's just
okay,
that.
so if you can you only filter by one value?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's it.
And then we probably need those capitals. Those are the options that we can filter by.
That's it. Yep.
Okay. And the option is all.
Forget that. That was just so you can
Okay.
see the API. I'm going to comment this out.
Okay, okay.
Actually, let me just help you out here. We can do placeholder. This will handle there's a placeholder there, so you don't need to worry about all. Yeah.
Okay, it's kind of fun because like I have to visualize how it
That's the beauty
work.
of YouTube, man. There's not only you and me, there's a whole audience
Yeah.
watching.
Yeah,
Hope you guys are
amazing.
enjoying this. If you are subscribed. Okay, let's go.
Okay. On change. What should that on change do?
So let me give you a hint in the interest of time. You need a new state variable.
Do I need filtered objects? Like filtered countries?
No, you can use countries, but like, what's the one variable that's going to now determine how the countries change? So the requirement is the user should be able to filter the list by capital.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the element that will determine what countries are shown?
The capital?
Yes. So would it make sense to have a state for that?
Yes, it does. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the use case, I guess. Guess I'm gonna use string for now. Or do you want me to properly type it?
So you can have no currently selected capital, which will show all of the countries. And you can also have a selected capital, which will then filter them.
Okay.
What I would do is I would just use the type in useState, just like you did with country. You also have a type for capital.
You defined
Line
it.
29.
Okay.
Yeah. So this will make sure that this state variable can only ever be used with one of the values that capital has.
Okay.
Cool. That's great. You're missing two things.
Okay, I need to render out the options, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So-
that's three things. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess let's just render out the options for now. Filterable capitals. Set. Yeah.
Yes, let me just tell you, you can go to the definition, but let me tell you the API, they just take in a value. So every option just takes in a value. That's it.
Okay. We need the key, I guess, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, oops. Okay.
You also need to, let me just do it for you. It's just easier.
Oh, it's not the cell.
It doesn't use the value directly. That's it.
Okay, yeah.
And then we can just remove this because it's no longer needed. Cool.
Okay, and then handle change. And then we can define our handle change in here. And think about the changes that we need to do. Okay. We need to filter out the countries by the capital. So we could go over all the countries and then use the filter function to check if the capital's inside the
You could,
object.
but there's a API endpoint for this, and you
Oh.
should use the API endpoint.
Oh, exactly. To filter by capital city, use the API endpoint. Okay, so I just provide the capital to the endpoint.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Okay. Okay, so we need another fetch, I guess.
Yes.
And then we just set the capital from the endpoint.
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, could just copy and paste it
Mm-hmm.
and just rename it real quick. We're gonna fetch from capital slash
You don't receive an event, you receive the value directly, the string.
okay.
It's abstracted away from you.
value. It's just a string, right? Okay. Then value, and then set capital. Guess that should work. Do we need to pass a value? No.
You've already passed.
Okay.
What you need to pass?
Fetch data is declared. Oh, I guess I need to fetch the data, right? I need to call it. Okay. That might be it.
Let's see. So that's okay. Let me just see if I can filter. It does not work.
Okay. What's the issue?
I don't know. It doesn't work. Just in the interest of time, we're like above time right now. I'm just going to show you the solution, but I really like that you did it this way because it's a different way than I would have thought.
Okay.
I would argue it's a little bit more complex and not necessarily the best way, but I completely get it and you are on the right track with your reasoning. So what I would do, because this onChange here gives you a key, right? I would only have this handle change worry about setting the capital here, right? Because you haven't used it anywhere, right? Like set capital. Oh, you did. Ah, okay. So here's your mistake. You tried to set the capital of data, of the data of the result. You would get countries back. You wouldn't get a capital.
Ah, okay.
So you would do set, what is it? Countries.
Okay.
Now let me just see if that does anything. No, it doesn't. It completely crashes the application. So don't worry about it. Yeah. But this is right. So instead of doing this, what I would do is I would just have this handle change here, right? Simply set capital value as capital, right? You have to cast it here as capital because if you don't, it's going to complain that value is not, basically this can be any string and there's no way to know if like this is one of these strings, right? So like what you want to do is you just want to tell TypeScript that like, hey, I know this, like it's fine, right? But even if you're doing this, then you actually don't even need this handle change function. You can directly do it here, inside of here, do this, value, and then just paste this like this, right? And then you get rid of this function, which isn't needed in this case.
Okay,
then,
yeah, makes sense.
You have this set capital, so you're updating the capital. The only thing that you need to do is pass it here in this useEffect. Instead of creating a new function, just plug it in here, right? So what we can do is we can just come here and then we can do if capital, then we're going to do, oh, let's let Copilot see what it comes up with. Will it work? Right. So if capital, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to fetch, but this time the capital URL with the capital, and then we are going to parse the data. If it's not, we are going to just run it as we had it before. But now that we have capital here in this useEffect, obviously we need to provide it in this dependency array. And then we have it here. Now we have these two lines that are like repeated code. I don't like to see that. So what I'll do is I'll just do const URL equals, and that's going to be capital question mark, and please Copilot, there we go. So if we have a capital, our base URL is going to be this, right? Which we pass in the capital. If we don't have a capital, it's just going to be all, which means that we can get rid of all of this code actually, and just instead of here, we can just pass it the URL. So now, whatever, we have a capital, we don't have a capital, we're always going to fetch it, we're always going to parse the data, and we're always going to set our countries to it. We passed it here to our useEffect, and then it's done. If I press save, go back to my application, reload everything, we have no errors in the console, I can select capital, and we only get the capital that we want, right? So this is usually the best way you have to think about this. This use effect is responsible for doing the fetching, and it will listen to some triggers, in this case capital. And if capital changes, it's just going to run the code again, and then this time with the capital. So that means you're on change here. All you really have to do is set the capital, and you know that this use effect is going to handle it for you, which arguably is one of the good things about React and one of the bad things about React, because you really need to know that this is what this use effect is going to do. And in this component, it's simple. We have one use effect, two pieces of state. But if you had like 7 use effects, like what's going to happen if you change this value, right? That's one of the downsides. You can get really mixed up. You can get like very complicated things. And I think that's why a lot of people like complain about React. But don't worry, dude. You did really well. You accomplished all of these goals. And even the way that you were trying to approach it, I completely understand why. This is just a slightly better pattern because it leads to cleaner code and you don't have to repeat yourself by creating multiple of these functions. But you did very good. So that's the end of the interview. Couple minutes above, but not too bad. You did very good. Thank you so much, Bogdan, for participating, for your time. And we will let you know if we will hire you for Content Solutions.
All right, man.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, thank you once again. And yes, we'll be in touch.
All right. Take care.
Ciao, ciao. So there you go, guys. That was a real world mock interview for a React position with my good friend Bogdan. Again, shout out to Bogdan. Huge thanks because he took the time out of his day to help me out with this video, with this interview. And I think he did great. So please do let me know in the comments down below what you think he did. And he will most probably be reading these comments. We'll see. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, as always, you can click here to subscribe. It will really mean the world to me. You can also click here to watch a different video of mine, which I'm sure that is super awesome because YouTube is recommending it to you. And with that being said, this is Darius Kozin. You're watching Kozin Solutions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Ciao, ciao.